MIT trained and studio tested, Roger blends engineering and design to create experiences with real magic. He's taking that ethos into mixed reality and future tech throughout all of his current endeavors. We just had an awesome conversation off camera about all things crypto and gaming and life. And I'm curious if you were to give me a bit of a backstory as to who you are, who Roger is, to preface this conversation. Give me that backstory.
I have a weird background. I went to MIT and did sort of like media lab stuff in the 80s. I wasn't happy being an engineer. As a kid, I'd worked on the space shuttle and a bunch of really interesting things. And as soon as I got out, I was like, hey, industry, like deal with it, right? You're an electrical engineer, which means, you know. So I went back to school, sort of graduate school at a place called Art Center College of Design, which is where all the famous like movie concept artists and like automotive designers go. And I learned how to draw and kind of do invention type stuff. That all led me to kind of getting in the video game industry for the better part of 30 years. And I guess later in life, that led to, well, it's like, if you need a cutting edge project for industry, whether it's an app or whatever, and you need to do some really experimental new stuff, you probably need people that came out of the video game industry. A few years ago, we were doing some real-time architectural visualization. If you get an architect in there, people, they'll make you a 3D movie of something, right? Because that's the tools they have. If you need to be able to walk around in it and look real, you need a bunch of video game guys. So the short version is that led me to getting involved with kind of adjacent technologies using those same people and teams. Super early pre-crypto blockchain stuff, mixed reality stuff, and now, like, of course, everybody's doing AI stuff, and some of us are trying to sort of save the world rather than make money with that. I have a real interest in keeping traditional things alive, craftsman things and techniques. I used to do a lot of hand Japanese style blacksmithing and knife making, hand tool woodworking, using only planes and chisels. I love that. So I can build beautiful stuff pretty fast. No one knows how we do it because those are sort of, and I like passing all those arts. Those are almost lost arts.
There's this perception of gaming, right? And I'm sure you've experienced it throughout the years working in the industry, that sort of thing. It's just a misunderstood industry from people that were never in it or aren't in it, right?
Right.
And I'm curious because you talked about this, game making and we talked a little bit off camera about MMO and decision making and that sort of thing, determining what paths you can take as a player. How do you think those experiences that you've had in game design kind of shape how you look at the world and interact with people?
Making a game is very much like a gestalt kind of thing, right? Believe it or not, nowadays there are people that just think that you just tell the AI, I have an idea for a game about mountain climbing, and you make a doodle. And it does the whole thing, right? You could imagine that no matter how beautiful or whatever that might be, it's going to be kind of a sort of a canned, potentially boring experience, right? Because it's a derivative thing based upon what's been done before, right? There might be some cool jokes and funny dialogue that AI is good at, but it's sort of similar to the difference between like a great movie and a movie that's similar but doesn't have that magic, right? One of the guys who works for me today was talking about sort of his differences between Pulp Fiction and like Kill Bill. One was sort of just like a weirdo action movie, but the other one had like really authentic seeming dialogue and interesting moments of like, hitman talking about shooting shit before they go do their job, right? And me, it's always like controls, skills, abilities. There's two parts. One is sort of a wish fulfillment or fantasy fulfillment, or something that's intellectually engaging. And the other side is the moment you pick up your phone and touch it, you need to be like bonded into the thing you do in that game. I don't know, whether you're grabbing something and flicking it or whatever, there needs to be like a monkey-like fun engagement that hopefully is also intellectually satisfying. Similar with something like a PlayStation game or PC game, you need to kind of like relate to your characters, or what I always say is when you touch the controls, you need to like merge into that. I love when I do this thing, the sword goes that way and I feel like I'm doing it, right? You can imagine that games like that would be boring if you just had to type what you're doing. Those things holistically need to kind of come together and you're like, this is a really cool universe for me to immerse myself in. And like you just said earlier, I really like the kind of intellectual relaxation, a bit like reading a book, of diving into like a deeper game mechanic. Like action games by themselves bore me, but action with something deeper is really cool. That experience of sort of seeing the big picture influences how I deal with people and teams. A common, for instance, management foible that I would see, especially nowadays, we've somehow ended up with a bunch of leaders that are like, get me a new engineer, right? Like, okay, well, our engineer that was like our game programmer guy, you know, had a baby and had to take a year off. Even you get somebody new and you just roll the dice, and we have like our choice between like the network programmer and the guy who programmed, you know, spreadsheets or something. They're like, would come in and they'd be like, I have no idea how to make a game, right? Mm-hmm. And we might have leadership that nowadays says, well, I don't know anything about it. You're an engineer, aren't you? That's good enough, like figure it out. So that doesn't work. You need that kind of like holistic chemistry of people who make a game, right? That are like, ideally you end up with something that's like, you know, Led Zeppelin or The Who, or, you know, a magic combination of people, right? And I think from that, I learned that that applies to a lot of other situations, whether it's dating or business or whatever. I see sort of how people are, where they are, what they're after, and how does that meld and blend with other people that are trying to do hopefully good things, right? Or bad things.
I'm thinking to my limited recent gaming experience, but like, if I'm not mistaken, there's a development company called Bethesda. Is that
Bethesda?
Right? Bethesda, that's right.
Yeah.
I know that they're known for a certain style of game, and I'm likening that to a bunch of other companies, right? Do you think, as a consumer, as a gamer, what's the common thread among games that people are attracted to and want to play again, even if there are kind of like the same structure?
One of Bethesda's famous products is their Fallout series, for instance, right? They made other things, but the original of Fallout was a 2D isometric view made by a different company way back when, Interplay or something. I forget who it was. One of the old school South Bay companies in Los Angeles. And then when Bethesda picked up the spirit of that, maybe like how like a Star Wars movie might have a different director the next time, right? And it's not George Lucas. But Bethesda was able to really get the soul of the old game and keep the things that were like magical for people. Because again, this sort of Gestalt experience where it all comes together to like create a sort of sense of wish fulfillment or creation, right? These guys were able to sort of bring it into 3D and sort of modern reality and keep those cool attributes and even make some modern playstyle things that added to or worked within those same attributes, right? So then people would follow that series, right? As long as they didn't lose their lifeblood, which happens sometimes, right? Sometimes a different team comes in and they lose the magic, right? And that's why I'm really big on capturing the magic. You can't just be like, yeah, this is disposable. We'll keep the name, you know, Star Wars and make it. In fact, I have a great story about this if you want to hear it. A few years ago, I redesigned a video game, a mobile game for a Korean company. And I'm still very dear friends with the CEO. Sony was going to make a new version of the Ghostbusters movie. It's actually the sort of new one that had Paul Rudd in it. That was in production at the time, and we were not allowed to see it. The only people that really know what Ghostbusters is are Americans and maybe Japanese people. I think it may have some popularity there. But Ghostbusters is a very specific kind of like comedy hook, right? It's kind of got like the old boys, well, not old boys, so the buddy, it's a buddy movie, right? It's got that quirky, like weird sense of humor, right? And I really love that because it reminds me of how MIT was in the 80s. What happened was this Korean studio, great studio, licensed the Ghostbusters brand from Sony and were like, we're going to make a Ghostbusters game. They didn't know what Ghostbusters was. They just knew it was a popular thing. So they licensed the look of that. They made the characters and art really beautifully, okay? But then the way the game played had nothing to do with Ghostbusters. There was like ghosts you could catch, but then you'd have to like fight them sort of Pokemon style. It was like, it made no sense. So what happened was really funny. So they brought me in and another very expert Austin game designer here, an old friend of mine. And what happened was we were like, it's wrong. Like it's really good, but it's wrong. And so what they were getting the effect of was Ghostbusters fans would rapidly download this game and then a week later delete it because it's like, this only looks like Ghostbusters. We wanted to kind of pull something off that was like contemporaneous, but would leapfrog Pokemon Go. Something that was like a bit of a on the streets, play everywhere kind of game, and a bit of a like a hobby as well as. And Ghostbusters movie was coming out; it looked good, so we redesigned the game in that way. And I don't think that game's going to release, sadly. Nevertheless, this is an example of a studio having kind of like forgotten that there was the magic, right? And we put the magic back in. I don't know how to explain it. There's sort of a directorial sense when you make something like that. What's the right pacing? What is wish fulfillment for the kind of player that's going to play my game? A lot of old school, you know, role-playing games like the ones that I worked on in BioWare, in Canada. There's all kinds of skills and abilities, right? Oh, you leveled up, you get to spend it on something, right? Do I want to have, if my BioWare friends hear this, they're going to hear my voice from like 20 years ago and they're going to laugh at me. But when I do my special shield bash move, I do 0.12 more damage, but it looks exactly the same. That was sort of the old school sort of min-max approach. And where games have gone, and certainly something we did well in that era, is like, no, I wanted to like, I want to see something. When I get a new move, I want that guy to like fly into the wall and the bricks explode everywhere. So you have to know who your player is, and is that wish fulfillment, you know, for the kind of player that's going to pick this game up. If they're a, you know, World War II history nerd, you better have all the authentic stuff, that uniform bits and everything. Or if you're making a football game, right, they better have the uniforms just right for each college team or whatever. There's a bit of an art in like finding out what is that. It's like a superhero movie. We've all seen superhero movies that were like flat, and it's like, it's just an action movie. Like, okay, I've had enough of that. Or like, no, this is a really cool origin story that's really like, yeah, there's some amazing action and effects, but also like, wow, like I want to be there, or I feel really moved by that, right? Those things can inspire us to be better people, do the right things. I think that's part of storytelling.
Is there an element of formula when it comes to game design? And what I mean by that is, you know, you need good people, and, you know, you need good leadership and a good plan and all these things. And obviously the best businesses can adapt and change and do all these things. But realistically, the ingredients, loosely, are known.
Some things that are conventions that people have become used to, and while you can bend them or change them, some things slightly can be familiar. If you do something different, you need to at least like connect the dots to something a little bit familiar. But I don't think the whole game needs to be formulaic. We don't really go into it that way. I mean, for some kind of games, like let's just say Madden football or something, right? That's going to be the same. And I think you're going to be looking to give the familiar, but up the ante with better voiceover, a more convincing football experience, whatever, player interviews, this kind of thing. But with most games where we're sort of innovating in a certain genre, there's a fair bit of flexibility. Maybe some things might feel familiar, like the inventory system, but you might even be able to expand that in some way, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always found it interesting growing up when, you know, friends were buying like the new Madden, the new NHL, whatever the case may be, every single year, because the fundamental differences were so minuscule.
That's right.
You know, every 5 years maybe you could be like, yeah, okay, I got the new one, right? But like every year is interesting.
Yeah, I worked on like some of the very first sort of management producer roles I had in the game industry were on some college football games, and I am not a football guy, but actually it kind of became interesting because more than pro football, like the college people are rabid, right? Like everybody knows that like the, you know, UCLA Bruins, I had this color shoelaces only in 65, and then they changed to that. So that part of it was kind of cool for me. There is a lot of push by the big studios to have bigger, greater effects and, you know, this kind of thing, just like movies. That doesn't work by itself. Nowadays, we also see a lot of games that explore a particular IP, right? Like, for instance, right now I'm playing a Warhammer 40K universe game called Rogue Trader. And it's cool because it's actually one of their historical properties in pen and paper games. And this developer made an amazing RPG out of it. I can't put it down. It's great. It's a real thinking person's game, but it's also fun and the story's compelling. So for me, that brings all those threads together and it's pretty compelling.
Is it rare for you to find something like that like kind of brings it all together as somebody who, you know, works on the street? Yeah,
like I don't want to play most things that much. There are those sort of popcorn and whatever kind of things where it's just pure action, and, you know, like my 12-year-old nephew will pick that stuff up and play it all the time. When you're not a kid anymore, you're looking for something a little different.
How did mobile gaming change the industry from somebody within the industry? And I'll preface, or more context being, we're inundated with ads these days, obviously, and I get them. I haven't been a gamer in several years myself, but I still get these phone ad games. They're clearly designed for me to download them because they're free, and they pump ads at me, and it's a super simple back end that like is super repeatable.
There are people who've mastered that, and I'm not one of those. There's a whole specialty of sort of business economy and designers around that. But yeah, the idea is basically get you in there. Either we'll make money off of some ads, right? Or we'll get you hooked. You can play pretty well for a while, but you're going to need to start buying stuff if you really want to, you know. And for some people, they love, a bit like gambling in casinos, they love spending money on the stuff in their games. Like I like to paint Warhammer miniatures. Buying stuff for the game is like buying more miniatures. They love it. They don't care. Some of those have very big revenue streams. Like you could say to some extent, like the Clash of Clans was probably the thing that Clash of Clans really kind of cracked that. And made that kind of, there's a name for it, but yeah, made that kind of action happen.
Would you say that like mobile gaming is kind of the thing that pushed that idea forward? Because traditionally, correct me if I'm wrong, but you would buy the disc or whatever the case may be, a digital game, and then you play the game in completion without having to add any more money to, into the engine. Whereas now it's pay to play at some point.
Yeah.
Does that change the development kind of landscape?
You do need to have a team that knows how to do that thing really well. And another thing that's really weird about mobile and that kind of category of game is a lot of it is marketing, advertising driven. So, if we spent $100 making a game, we're going to have to spend $500 or $1,000 to get it seen in the App Store like that week before it disappears, right? So there's a huge amount of the push that in a way goes into like user acquisition, and it's a big spend. It's a big part of the budget. That didn't used to happen at all. And when done right, there's an art to it. Like when done right, you kind of don't mind, right? It's not too onerous, right? You can buy something occasionally if you want to, or buy a lot, but you don't, like the game still remains fun even if you don't. They'll have like seasons in a way, and you can pay $9 or to have the season pass, and you'll get all this extra content and you can do more stuff, and then it's like, well, I'm going on vacation or I can't play right now, and you just turn that off, but you can come back and turn it on later on, a month at a time. So that's kind of cool. When it's done well, it's not obnoxious. And then there are other games that do that, including some of the PlayStation games and the Xbox games that push that so hard, players are like, I'm not touching this ever again, right? You've been rude to me. I already paid you for the game. Maybe there's not necessarily a person behind it, but somehow corporate greed gets into like a mode of like, we want to make our numbers, so we need to do this. And it's like, you don't realize you're going to lose all of your players if you do that. So like, find the balance. Don't be too greedy.
Where is this intersection between gaming and blockchain or NFTs? Or let's dive into that conversation and kind of maybe let's start with your first interaction with the intersection of these different worlds.
It ties into the wish fulfillment thing for players. There's some things that players have always wanted to do, and why not give it to them, right? Especially if it's a revenue stream, right? Cool, right? We have a situation though, because crypto came along where there became confusing forces that might look like, like, let's just say a hockey game, right? There's people who want to go watch a hockey game because they love hockey, right? And they're pretty rabid. But now let's just say like the hockey game got taken over by like the hot dog and popcorn vendors and they're getting rich off of this or something. But let me go back to the player equation. So we first started to see some of this stuff with things like CryptoKitties. It wasn't exactly a game that you could load on mobile, right? But you could sort of run it through mobile, I think. But you got like a weird wallet, and your account would hold a kitty, right? It was like a little face of a cartoon kitty. What you could do is you could breed these things to get more and mix them, right? And then maybe you would get like a rare or a decent rarity kitty, right? That you could then sell to somebody else. But there wasn't any gameplay. There wasn't really any environment you lived in. There wasn't anything to do. So in a way, it's a lot like playing the stock market, except you have a cute picture, right? You could sell these things, right? So that was sort of happening. And Engine that I went to work for in that era had been at it for like quite a while before, but doing sort of like website tools and things for players to have like guilds. So if you played like, Guild Wars or World of Warcraft, you could spin up a guild, and then depending, a bit like a Discord channel, right? But they had all these tools to create websites and create awards, and you could give badges and status and things. It was kind of like a hobbyist wrapper for like a game. I have a dear friend who got married because he met somebody playing World of Warcraft, and they're very happy together. They're one of the best couples. There were some good friendships and things that came out of this, as unlikely as it is, right? So when I think about, and Engine was doing that, and then they're like, blockchain is coming on, which lets us make digitally unique items. And really the like get rich stuff was like later, right? They weren't really trying to do that. And I like that because there's a few things I think players want. I didn't really plan it this way, but going back to the wish fulfillment kind of thing, like if you're playing there's a Star Wars game that has a big online community, maybe something like Destiny, where people can kind of hop in, or it's a traditional MMO or whatever, but there's a bunch of people and it's now their hobby, and you remember at the height of like MMO era where like games would be like, we have 8 unique locations where your in-game character can get married, right? I mean, there was like a whole Renaissance fair, like wish fulfillment of this stuff, right? And that's healthy for people in a weird way. What if you were the only guy that had the weird glowing black lightsaber? People would be like, where did you get it? And, maybe you're like some, accountant in the Midwest or something, and you do this as your hobby, but this is your chance to like feel heroic, right? People are going to want to know where you got it, like, how did, or if the developer dropped that, right? If there was a game where there was teams or competition and there's only 5 of those things in the whole game universe, or if that was like a weird lightsaber made by this special, unique craftsman person, why not let the craftsman and the owner of the lightsaber be like, get some fame in game, right? That's kind of what players live for. They love their badges and they love their status and leaderboards. A lot of them, not all, but many. And if they're not into like the fame, they like the mythos, right? So they want to, like, the idea of finding like, some obscure weird thing in the game that they can have that's rare is pretty cool for them. So that's a big wish fulfillment thing for players. And guess what players don't want to do is sell that to somebody else. Their in-game cred is why they're doing this. They didn't earn that item to get rich or something, mostly, So there's another thing that players really like, which is I was there phenomena. So if like at a PAX trade show in Seattle, right? I don't know, there's an announcement of like a unique, I'll have to go back to Star Wars. There's a new Star Wars movie by surprise that's released, and you were at the premiere and you could get a digital item, like think of it as getting a t-shirt, but it's a digital item for your character in the Star Wars game that you can't ever get again. You can't trade it, you can't sell it, you can't make more of them.
Yeah.
And there were only 50 of them given out. Like or if maybe it was an esports tournament where, God forbid, like the Mexico team beats the South Korean team for the first time historically, like in whatever. I was one of the like 50 people that were invited to this match, and like I won a prize. They gave me a plane ticket to go to South Korea, and I was there. That's like a big boast experience for many players, right? So, and not all of those things get old. Like they don't wear out if the game's popular, right? So where I was at with engine stuff was the chance to have unique digital collectibles that could do those things is really cool for players, and they would pay money for it. They would gladly stay with that game or do whatever amount of work it took or buy a season pass in order to get those things, right? You see people all the time in games like, Diablo or Warcraft, like grinding to get like the full armor set or whatever. This is that kind of thing times 10. So I like that a lot. And also I like giving the players a chance to also show off their flair, right, in game themselves, especially in our society now where so many people don't have any voice, like they're just a drone in real life, right? So anyhow, that was really cool. So we got going with that, and a lot of people also really want to be able to do like a digital ownership kind of thing, and this intersects with that. So that's like if I had a rare bootleg Hendrix album and I'm like, don't scratch it, but I'll loan it to you for the weekend for your party, I can't play it while you have it, right? And only one of us has it at a time, and you have to give it back. So blockchain allowed the idea of things of being able to say like own a song. Obviously the business powers that be don't want to do this, but a song or a game that you could loan to somebody or trade or sell it to them, and it would literally change hands, right? You can't hack it or clone it or whatever. So people really like that stuff, and there was a lot of like, well, I bought this game on Steam and I haven't played it in a long time. Why can't I gift it to my little brother or trade it to him? Most companies would rather just have them buy a copy too. A couple of us at Engine that were traveling a bunch started to have ideas about what could we do with all of this stuff. Like we would give kind of the examples I just gave you, and I think a lot of developers really liked that stuff. I still remember we were at a trade show in the very Busan, the South Beach part of South Korea, and some of our developers had said, hey, let's attach like a game object that you can store in your wallet on your phone. It was also cool because you could grab your phone and like look at your loot from any particular game. So it made the objects feel real. And we said, let's make a QR code that when you scan it, it does like a blockchain thing and you get that game item. So we can literally, like, my example for the longest time was like, you go to a Starbucks and you buy, hey, there's a promotion for the new Star Wars game. Your phone's equipped with a digital wallet. Whenever you go to Starbucks, because I don't know if you guys had anything like this in Canada, but in the States a long time ago, when there was a new Spider-Man or Batman movie, you'd go to Taco Bell and you'd get your like Batman glass that you'd get if you got the whatever meal, right? One aspect of this that I think ties into nowadays is there's a kind of utility advertising you can do where people like, there's not all advertising is bad, right? Sometimes there's like a commercial that's absolutely hilarious or meaningful or touches you. And yeah, it makes you want that brand, but it's legit, right? So we've talked a lot about doing things like if Toyota wanted to do a big promo with an app, they could do a thing where whenever you go to the local 7-Eleven or a gas station, you scan the code, right? And you unlock a part for your, ultra monster, Toyota Tundra truck, right? And it's a little racing game, right? You build this big monster truck and you race it, right? Well, there could be leaderboards, but you could also do a thing with like whoever, collects all the parts or whatever, and once a year, every 6 months, they win a truck. And then we show them like with their truck, right? That could be powered with blockchain, right? And I really like things like that. I think there's still a place for that. A lot of traditional agencies and everything haven't sort of figured out they need to pivot to stuff like this. That's what that generation will use. You can do educational things, treasure hunts where you go around a town and scan things and there's secure puzzle bits and whatever. Then cryptocurrency started to happen pretty hard, right? And people figured out I can anonymously run all kinds of scams here, right? It was kind of bad, including game objects, right? So there were already this is not a well-known fact. The game economy, stuff for sale in the world, games and everything, is like about a $200 billion industry. It's bigger than movie and music, TV combined, pretty much. And something like 40 billion of that a year is like digital items, some of which are sold in games, but there's actually a vast, we never know how big it is, there's a vast black market before blockchain of tradable gray market items, right? So like their classic one is there were people who, I know some of them, who were like a miner in like World of Warcraft or Diablo, and they would run like, all these 10 bots, and they would understand that if they set their character up a certain way, the objects would not bind to their character. They were like little tricks. And then you could be like, hey, meet me in the game. I'm going to sell it to you on eBay or something. Meet me in the game and like PayPal me, $1,000 and I'll drop it and you can pick it up. This is a big industry, and there are people who made a lot of money doing that. Markets online that are millions and millions of dollars a year, in money, where people could buy and sell game objects, right? But mostly, that's not what most gamers want. There are some things where like your ownership or your effort matters, right? And you would feel like a poser if you just bought that thing, right?
For example, achievement-based versus like luck or like luck of the draw. And
right.
Examples might be, World of Warcraft, you have to grind for this armor because you need X stats and whatever the case may be.
Right, and if you have it, it shows oh my God, you did that raid solo?
Right.
That's cool, yeah. Right?
And then the flip side might be Counter-Strike, where you open a case and you get this rare knife that, 200 people have and it's worth 10 grand, whatever the case. Yeah. But there's no skill advantage, which I think opens up a whole new can of worms, right? Because there's no skill, like in the World of Warcraft example, not only is it, not only do you need to grind to get that, like it requires input, but it also gives you an advantage in game. It's a better armor, the min-max piece, stats.
Yeah.
Whereas Counter-Strike, you might have paid thousands of dollars for this thing that functions like any other knife in the game. It gives you no skill advantage whatsoever, but you look cool as hell.
Think about like how all the seam would come out of the system if that like Diablo or World of Warcraft armor set didn't matter because you could just buy it. And that directly affects the economy of those kind of games too, in a way. From all of that, there started to be NFTs for a while, right? And this reminds me of what's happened with business in general, is like it's utterly worthless. A lot of the deals that are reported in the news, like this, remember those little CryptoPunk things? There's one where like it sold for like $11 million or something. Well, a lot of those kind of things were simply two friends like conspiring to like they'd sort of both put the money in and pretend it was a transaction to pump up the market and make it look great, right? And then the media would report it as a legit thing, but what happened is they pumped and dumped like a coin or some other kind of stuff like that. There's a lot of that. That thing kind of, thank God, ran its kind of course. And there were also, along with owners of NFTs essentially trying to kind of pump and dump markets to get rich, there were companies doing that too. There were all these sort of like blockchain technology companies that were trying to like buy developers by giving them money or different things to get like their tech to be like the main one that everybody used. But again, just like buying a collectible and not really having anything in the box, it kind of was hollow in the end. Mm-hmm. So I think that I'm hoping, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm hoping there's kind of a new era available where the people who just didn't have any soul in the game and maybe made some money or maybe didn't go away. No one's going to pay you for that thing anymore, right? Right? And that there may be some of these like genuine utility type cases, right? There is a place for people to make money on some of this stuff. And the way you set that up is that people who want to invest in the game can invest in some sort of part of the economy of the game, and the players don't have to touch that. They don't have to touch the blockchain. Well, they don't have to touch the crypto, right? Or cash from investment, but maybe the actions of the players generate revenue that then pumps these guys' stuff. So it's like, in a way, yeah, I want to come in and, to use a Star Wars example, I'm like that grubby spaceship trader guy who makes money on, like, I don't care what you do with it, kid, like, just, you know, it went up, I get some money, right? Leave me alone. Great, that's a kind of gameplay, that stock market type experience, and you can kind of have that exist in the same universe as, like, I just want to build a bitchin' spaceship, and then, like, I'm done with it because I'm ready to build, like, a Death Star. I can cash out and sell that for, like, in-game money maybe. So, like, there are perks for me that I care about, but those perks aren't just like I got cash, right? I'm not looking to just get out of this. There's plenty of room for that. There's also some games I think that, like, you could do, like a game I designed a few years ago was like almost like a build your own sort of Pokemon / Monsters Inc. creature out of parts. All the parts are collectible, right? You can trade them with friends. And so that creates a kind of social experience that makes kids have time with their friends, which I really like, right? You're not just like locked off in the game. I think there's a lot of room for some of those kind of things. It's really cool.
I never really thought about that idea of, you know, if you make it like peer-to-peer outside of a game, then it brings in this element of like, okay, I have to go chat with my friends, I have to go trade with them in real life, whatever, to be able to enhance my experience online.
Yeah, I've done this with both like some designs for like dating app kind of things and for like game things where like whenever you go into a Starbucks, for instance, there's like a trading portal that's open and you can't get to the trading portal any other way than in person. And now you don't necessarily have to see who the people are, but you're like, oh, there's 5 other traders here, right? Do you want to trade? They're anonymous. You don't get to see who they are. But if you want to while you're trading, you know, whatever, and you got a coffee, right? Maybe Starbucks gave you a free item as their like cool sponsorship, right? I think that's a thing a lot of people would like. And yeah, okay, I'm feeling social today, so I'm going to unlock my portrait. And then I could be like, oh my God, like it's that Aiden guy over there. Like we could be like buds and maybe you made a new real world friend, right? I think that's really cool. There's a lot of neat human stuff we can do with that.
We're having these great conversations about things that the tech already exists for. It's really not that complicated to execute. In fact, lots of businesses did do digital collectibles and they really fell flat very quickly.
Yeah.
I was victim to some of them, I'm aware.
One of the reasons that some of it went away is that sort of bad actors made everything in that space seem like a scam.
Right.
So then nobody wanted to touch anything legitimate, right? There's plenty of legit stuff to do.
I agree fully. I just think it's interesting that, you know, whether it was purchased with, you know, fiat or some sort of crypto or whatever the case may be, you got this digital collectible. Point being, you buy this and immediately the value falls and no longer the tech is, like the promise is no longer there. And so I guess my question full circle is, do you think this will ever actually come up again? Or do you think it was like, the tech has been killed?
The reason it got to be like what you said is people figured out, so when I worked at Engine, it was awesome. Like I'd go to like a trade show, say like in, you know, the Game Developers Conference or E3 or something in Korea. You know, there were a bunch of people that were like me or younger me that really wanted to make their game and they needed to raise money, right? So they would do the following. They'd make just like how people did the ICO, initial coin offering with crypto, right? They'd be like an initial item offering, right? So they'd have like a kind of like a pre-sale of items. You know, hey, like you can get into the Star Wars game, to use your example, buy a lightsaber, right? And in, you know, for every 10 lightsabers you buy, you might get a rare kyber crystal that becomes collectible, right? And we're not ever going to make more of those. So what happened was people would either take cash or crypto to build out their game economy, and then they would start to build the game, right? With the idea that it's just like a Kickstarter. You helped boot it up, so you get a cool lightsaber. Some of that got kind of scammy. Some people were like super legit developers that were doing what they said they were going to do, right? But then some of them were like, we already got the money. Just give them like a postage stamp of their item and like tell them to go away, right? It was bad. So just because, or we had a lot of people coming into the space that were not from the game industry, right? That was a weird thing about these blockchain games, is you didn't really have to be like a game designer because some of them were just almost like a stock market trade kind of thing. They didn't really know how to manage their budgets correctly. And even us, you know, pro devs, if you think it's going to cost $1 million, it's going to cost 10, right? Those people would grossly sort of underestimate what it needed to be to get something out, right? and then it would shoot them in the foot, and then they'd have to like go back on their word and make it their sale. So it attracted sort of a mixture of the wrong kind of people, and that made it look dirty. The purpose of doing those kind of games isn't just to raise money, right? That doesn't work really. If you do it halfway and you keep everybody's money, that's bad. So plan well, and maybe if you run it as a legitimate game studio, then you're okay, which is admittedly a hard thing to do.
I agree with everything that you said, and it was super scammy, and you know, these big names that had good intention and got a bad rep because they were in a space.
Yeah, not all of it was scammy, but there were enough scammers
to make it and the perception.
Yeah, and there was also a lot of like, there were some games where an outside financial force came in and like bought up everything in the game so they could make money, or I'm abstracting a little bit, so they could make money and would resell those things, and they would basically take control over the developer because we own your economy. That was also really weird. Like, you will do what we say.
Right.
No, I think the closer it's run to like a real game product, right? Like you said with mobile, with a proper in-app store or whatever, and or maybe at least make it clear to players, what's an experimental like collectible item versus a regular thing. If you run it more legitimate, it can be good.
Ultimately, I think what lacked in the space, because I was there for the Rise and Fall, the NFT kind of thing, and
it had no other goal other than to get money out of the system.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I also think that there was no accountability. And what I mean by that is, like, I bought into projects that I felt very good about early on. Like, like they did Other Deeds. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
Which is basically a metaverse that they were creating.
Yeah, I do know about that. You know what it's called.
Intended to become a metaverse, as many different metaverses did promise, and never did it.
But that was just an excuse to get you to buy more of their shit.
Totally. But I wish I mean, I guess that's where I'm going with this, is that the space was full of false promises. And I think, unfortunately, because there was no accountability on it, and I'm pro freedom. I'm pro, like, do what you want, and I'm willing to lose a little bit to take some risks on that idea. Yeah. However, there were so many promises and no execution.
It was a bunch of like Wild West where the cowboys didn't even know how to work their guns. Mm-hmm. That powerful decentralization thing that could be useful in some instances, that's the ability for it to act as a double blind where nobody would know who you are, right? Made it people able to do that maliciously even.
One other thing that you mentioned, at the very beginning of this conversation that I'm really interested in diving into is your love of creating something that matters. I think it's been a thread even as we've been talking about gaming and that sort of thing, but tangible products, you mentioned knife making and that sort of thing. What got you into that, and why do you still practice it today?
All along I'd been chasing things that, like, I needed to make a living. I wanted to make more cool games, so we need money to do that, right? And so I would have an idea, and I think people would think it's fun, and I wanted to do it. But what is that? That's pure, in a polite way, pure Roger's ego or whatever. It's just, Whereas if you had an idea, let's just transform it into recording a song. If I just wanted to sing a song because I like those metal riffs and they're crunchy, there's probably not going to be a song that captures everybody's soul, right? Whereas if you somehow get in groove of the everyman or talk about something that matters, and then you add your personal touch to it, it has a chance to catch air and fly, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this is what happened to me later in my career, is mixing of the craftsmanish instincts and wanting to make a difference and do cool stuff became kind of a thing. And then I think those kind of projects catch air more. Our family name is Walkowicz, right? It's this long, Polish family name. And as far as I can tell, all my, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they were all craftsmen, mostly leather workers and shoemakers in Poland, Belarus, that kind of thing. I just love to make stuff, right? That's what I thought when I was a little boy. I can remember a lot of silly things I did. And I just had that bug. But as I grew up, I realized all the Walkowicz boys, all my dad's brothers, have all had this. It's well, where's, Uncle Sid? He's out walking at 3 in the night, and he'd come back with all kinds of thorns and things off of plants, and I don't know, I'm gonna make something. And he had all the shit in his house, right? He'd make weird things out of them. So that was very much an instinct. As I got into my late 20s, I started to build things more seriously, like furniture and stuff. And I had gone to design school after engineering school, so I wanted to sort of bring some of these visions to light, and I got the crafty skills to do it, right? And then I discovered, this is why you've always had that itch, if you will. I just love doing it. It's my Zen happy place. And somehow that's in the blood. It's really weird, right? We all are like that. After poking around, building some of my own stuff, I somehow became fascinated, probably because of my tools. I like a lot of old hand tools, and I wanted to know how to sharpen them, and I wanted to know how to make them, and then I was like, I need to have better, sharper tools, right? Which the Japanese are kind of the masters of. So was a famous knife maker in Los Angeles that I studied blacksmithing under. I don't know how I did this. I had a full-on coal forge in my backyard in our crowded city block, and I would make a giant plume of smoke every afternoon. And I don't know how I did not go to jail, but somehow I was out there blacksmithing, and I started making knives, and I really liked that. And then that kind of evolved also into me learning how to do hand tools woodworking. I feel happy when I'm building that way. It's not really a way to make a living in our culture here. That's a $1 an hour job, right? Maybe. You might get some money after you die when you're famous, but it doesn't really work. I think over the years I sort of have experimented, especially later in life, with things that are more like a functional version of that. And although I still do make some beautiful like furniture, some knives, and some leatherworking type stuff, I eventually took what was sort of a hobby business as a professional Japanese style sharpener, and it became like a kind of a full-time thing. So nowadays I consult. I don't really want to work for American companies in the present climate. I don't really like how that feels to me. It's a lot of politics and a lot of financial stuff. And I get to kind of go back to some of that sort of European, Asian tradition and, be hands-on some every day. It really gives me joy. We have sushi chefs and with their $500 knives, and people who are high-end hairstylists with $1,500 little scissors. And I'm one of the few, there are people who do this all over the place, but I'm one of the few actual experts in the country somehow. And they love me, right? When and I always say when I was an engineer or a game designer, maybe here's your bonus, kid, or maybe you liked it that your game was cool. But really, people don't say thanks. It's a pretty brutal industry. And now, people give me hugs for my work in addition to paying me. Yeah. So that's kind of, it's rewarding, yeah. So that I like having that balance. It makes me feel pretty good.
Do you currently do commission pieces? Is that kind of how that works?
I'm actually building a ginormous piece of furniture, like a whole room-size system for somebody's sort of game room at their house. And it's gigantic. It's 20 feet wide, 7 feet tall, and maybe 8 feet deep. It's like a whole furniture system for this entertainment room. It's pretty cool. I can send you some other photos. I've done some big copper chimneys for some very custom architecture, like when I lived in Washington State, right on the islands and things where BB comes on. I did these beautiful, beautiful copper chimneys. So I definitely am angling into that as my retirement job. I love building stuff and building unique stuff, and our craftsmanship is pretty high, and people can't find craftsmen anymore. You can't even find a detail carpenter anymore, or somebody who does stonework or something. I love that stuff. I have a guy who's worked for me maybe for the past year, and he's gotten quite good, which is hard to do. I've had a few apprentices that didn't quite work out, but this guy's gotten quite good. And at some point he said, "Oh, Roger, I've always wanted to apprentice under somebody and have this thing." And that's how I got it, right? So it feels for the first time really good to do that. I mean, he's happy as hell about it. And he's also a highly degreed scientist engineer, so similar to a younger version of myself. I really do think that a lot of our science and engineering stuff that should be sort of passion and humanitarian and financially viable has sort of been taken over by the kind of get rich quick kind of economies. And I'd like to see that come into balance again. I don't know if it will.
Maybe the first step is people just following a passion, not in somebody you. You said you didn't want to work for a corporation or whatever the case may be, or for your own reasons. Maybe people are passionate about doing that, but I think most people can follow passions.
Yeah, but even when I've had teams, or when my brother Victor and I were working on RealityLens, we always had a vision of how the company should run, how the people should run, and what I always say to all the game industry people, if you just curate the right team, you need the right people. Not everybody's suited for this, right? And good people also. Not everybody's morally suited for this. There's a lot of politics. But once you kind of get a team that can produce magic, all you need to do is really protect that team. They'll keep making you more magics, right? And you'll do well. And I always think that your most important thing is just take care of, it's a bit like a father, right? Take care of your team. Don't be stupid. You need to set boundaries, but that's your job. I think we've lost sight of that a little bit, and I try to bring that back with whatever I do, even if it's a team of 3 or a bigger team, And maybe try to make the stuff you make. There are a lot of people now tapping into revenue streams that are clever, right? Mm-hmm. There's some people are I'm just going to produce, AI bots or produce random stuff on the web because I can make money off of it. Like, who cares? And so it's like, I don't want to add to that noise, right? I understand you can make money at that, but not everything needs to be kind of a hustle. There was a time a few years ago where I was supposed to like go back to like a crypto thing. There was a big channel. They wanted me to be on the show, and I was going to start like a channel that talked about this digital collectibles, like what we talked about. And what I've discovered is that everybody is so hypnotized by the like, I can get rich quick with crypto, that literally nobody is thinking about this actually good stuff that everybody wants. It's really still almost kind of secret. I should get out there and talk about it some more, but I haven't had the time. But it's funny how that works, right?
You look at the numbers, right? And they speak for themselves. Like there's definitely people that have gotten rich quick.
Yeah.
There's 97% of people who have been liquidated multiple times,
Absolutely.
lost all their resources. Like, I think, I mean, not to make it full circle, but you liken it to like business, for example, and the same kind of thing was glorified in entrepreneurship years ago, right? It's like, oh, you become your own boss, and yeah, you take a little bit more risk, but you're going to make all the money in the world, and that's the best thing ever. Well, look at the numbers again, right? Most people are not making it the same way. So you kind of chase what you want, but it really is what you make of it, right? What's next for you? What's coming down the pipeline?
Well, occasionally there's consulting gigs. I like it. I like either redesigning a game for somebody, or I've had some like big private equity funds that are like, Roger, shall we invest in this? And I'll go away and research and call my contacts and be like, no. And it's pretty rewarding to save somebody $20 or $30 million. I like it. It feels good to be. My brother Victor and I, for a while, were working on, I'll just touch on it, RealityLens, right? Which was kind of like my brother is a long-time flight paramedic. He's a helicopter paramedic, and now he's sort of like a officer executive at his company. But we had been talking for a long time about a lot of things that were missing in what we would call like public safety, right? And so we had the idea to use some of the tricks we can do with games and with mixed reality to kind of service that industry. And I felt like this could really make a difference, right? And so what we decided to do is, I don't hold my phone, but I hold it up. In a world where everybody's talking about Google Glass and whatever, we realized that just using a phone and like mixed reality tricks, like, Pokemon Go will give you bad augmented reality. It's kind of wonky, but we could do things like draw paths on ground, or so Victor has an extensive search and rescue background, big teams of people looking for like a lost kid in the Grand Canyon or something, right? And realize, oh my God, we can network this together, like tie it into the sheriff's office, and everybody doesn't need to be walking around with a, $4,000 HoloLens, like just for something like mountain biking or search and rescue, where you just need to get out and a map won't do what you need because you're like, well, we're here, there's a dot, I don't see anything. But to be able to like kind of give people on foot or on bike like the heads up display like you'd see in a fighter pilot, you don't need the helmet. You could just hold your phone and kind of do it. And use some tricks to make the imaging good. That was like a really cool thing to chew on. So some of my MIT buddies have been in like AI for like, I don't know, it's like 12 years now, machine vision, AI, more than that, maybe 15 years, way ahead of the kind of trend. A bunch of my friends are in those kind of spaces. And so they had inspired us we went after like this fast track SBIR business kind of stuff. And we got hooked into some stuff through the National Science Foundation, and it was really exciting and cool that they liked what we're doing. And then we realized from that, while we were busy trying to get some demos together, pretty soon everybody's going to have actual glass, right? Our same technology could be used both for like the handheld consumer, like a little kid walking home from school, just follow the little like dog on your screen, right, to get home.
Gamified too.
Yeah, you can gamify it, right? And then also like when, high-end mixed reality stuff comes out, but yeah, we can tap into that. And so that's something I'd still like to do. It's very expensive for a while there were a few threads of investment we thought were going to like tackle this for us and get going. Those don't exactly exist anymore. So when we got our deck and our prototype kind of ready, we thought, oh, that's not there, whoops. I won't mention the names. But that could still happen. That would be a big and really satisfying, like it probably with a pretty small team, you could build a working demo. That would probably be really safe. Like, I guess it feels different to me because it could really make a difference for a lot of people, not just on a recreational sense, but it could literally save lives. And that's something my brother does every day, and I kind of admire him for that, you know. I didn't exactly have that same kind of purpose that he has, and I kind of inherited it from him around this. So that's I tend to look at my business opportunity as like, what's the short-term stuff, right? And then I water a few different, like 1 or 2 long-term ones like that. It's still kind of there in the background. That could be next, right? Yeah. And slowly, I'm, you know, I'm not as young anymore, although I think I'm young, but I'm definitely leaning into like the stuff that's my joy, you know, furniture making type stuff, when I retire, which hopefully won't be that far away. Yeah.
Where can we send people to follow along what you have coming up, whether it be your furniture, your personal thoughts? Where can we send people?
Gosh, you know, sometimes people have asked me to like put together some sort of blog or resource. Ideas welcome, everybody, and you, but I guess just LinkedIn for now. They can just look me up as Roger Walco. I'm happy to chat with whoever. Another thing another thing that is coming up, one of the universities, you know, now we have a situation where anybody who got a degree in like media studies or computer graphics or something often hasn't worked in the industry of these like real-time visualization systems, right? However, a lot of universities are starting to have like computer game programs. It's a thing, or writing for games or whatever. And they have to use people like me because most of the academics haven't had that background professionally, right? So a dear friend of mine who teaches quite a lot recently invited me to maybe teach at one of the local universities, and I hope it's going to go through. That would be probably something that I do 1 or 2 days a week, and I love teaching. I really love teaching. The engine thing taught me that I liked people and stuff more than being in the trenches. I like having the idea for the trenches, but it can be a bit of a difficult place, right? So teaching at a university level could happen soon as well. And a couple of those old AI buddies that used to run like massive, starting about 10 years ago, massive AI operations, like early AI figure out for some of the big like social media players. So the AI products are trying to get market share. They're trying to get more venture capital. They want to at least pretend that people are using them for useful things so they can get more investment. I've seen it a number of times with friends and family that are like working somewhere, and literally somebody at the top has gone to a seminar and thinks, yeah, they just gave me a snapshot of something, and I'm just like, here, make this and put it out on the app. Like, we are going to get to that soon, but it's not exactly really a very clean thing. And to some extent, I think you're always going to get that sterile movie, right? Like, yeah, that's great. It has all the effects and stuff. Why isn't it as good as, you know, the first whatever movie? Because it doesn't have a soul, right? So these guys have created this really cool, they're in Singapore, this really cool, like a think tank for AI stuff, but it's not like, here's how to write a prompt like CEO of like Coca-Cola. It's like, here's how this is going to change your world. And not just like, you're going to hire all these people or you're going to fire all these people. It's like, all of these people at your company are going to be using this tool to do that. So it's almost like, hey, accounting department, it's not like, now that there's Excel, you're all fired and Excel is going to do it for you. There may be a day for that, but hopefully not. It's more like, hey, like your accounting department needs like, you know, 1/3 less of these people and double the number of people for this, right? And this is how it's going to sort of change and CEO, that's all you need to know to like plan around this, right? Yeah, you're going to have to build a giant water-cooled power plant in your backyard or whatever if you're using that stuff. So these guys are doing education along these lines about like what's really going to happen. They do a lot of like super, super deep research. I'm just fascinated with this. And they kind of know where all the trends are at all the time. It's a couple of guys that like are really deep in this and they've been doing it for a long time. So they're kind of like, yeah, this isn't going to happen right now, but this is going to happen and you should think about it. So, and they've been widely engaged at educating at universities and corporate level and stuff. But again, not like here's how to write a prompt type stuff. And so they're more looking at trends. And so they asked me to be their guy to educate around here. So also I'm hoping that I'm going to be using the power of their think tank, presenting their goods to like at the university or corporate level here. That would be really fun that you can see that's sort of similar to the other thing.
Totally. Yeah, well, it's like you said, you love education.
I do.
This is like, it's almost reality education. It's also very clear through our conversation that you care about morals and people.
I think with the common thread between this and the very first thing you said about games is I like inspiring people to do what they're good at and where they want to add. And if they're evil, I want to put them down.
Roger, this has been super fun.
Yeah, it has. I'm shocked about how this is, but it's really neat. Thanks so much for
I appreciate
you guys so much. Yeah.